Good morning, Year 10. So this lesson is going to look very, very familiar to you because we've already done it. So we're going to go over what we did at the end of last term with our creative writing, and we're going to talk about Joe's Chippy. I'm going to remind you what we did, and then you are going to go and complete a task linked to that. So when we looked at creative writing, we talked about the importance of these techniques using your imagery techniques, so things such as similes, using things you could see, smell, taste, touch and hear, the five senses, the importance of onomatopoeia words, zooming in really closely on images and key characters, using personification, metaphors, alliteration, and things like snippets of dialogue. So not using big chunks of speech, but tiny things that people have said. So way back in the 8th of December, we had a little look at this extract. The wind howled like a wolf in the night. Across the field, I could see the outline of leaves dancing daintily in the night. Bang! My heart was a drum, beating heavily against my chest. Creeping slowly through the path, my skin brushed against some nettles. Their sting was like 1,000 piercing needles. And in class, I asked you to identify and label those features. So these were the things that we picked out. So the personification of the wind, the simile, the wind howled like a wolf in the night, which creates a sense of foreboding. It creates a dark atmosphere. The adverbial phrase of time across the field, adverbial phrase of place across the field. I could see the outline of the leaves dancing, so the personification of the leaves there because they can't dance. And the adverb daintily in the night, making them seem quite delicate. The short sentence for effect, bang, it's also an onomatopoeia word. My heart was a drum, a metaphor, beating heavily against my chest. Adverb there, creeping slowly through the path, my skin brushed against some nettles. Their sting was like 1,000 piercing needles. Again, another simile. So just some of the techniques that we were encouraging you to include. So then we read Joe's Chippy and we asked you to find an example of these within the text. And these were just some of the things that we discovered from Joe's Chippy. The five senses, the smell of the chips, the sight of them, the similes shone like a purple beacon, the moss to a lamp, which you remember was taken directly from Great Gatsby, like tiny pieces of sunlight, another simile there. We talked about the importance of just using snippets of dialogue, the old man saying youth of today, making him sound quite grumpy, the server saying chips are ready, the metaphor of the queue snaking through, and a lot of you used that in your actual writing when it came to it. The kitchen was a furnace, the forest of legs that the children were running in and out of, the alliteration of boys laughing loudly, the chips frying in the fat filled the air, personification of the queue, it snaked, there was close-up detail, the old man and the customer, the server and the chippy, the father with the children. And then we looked at Joe's Chippy itself in more detail. So meanwhile, the neon sign above Joe's Chippy shone like a purple beacon, drawing in customers who passed on the street like moss to a lamp. Below the sign, light came flooding out through the front window, revealing a hectic scene inside. So we've very much got this overview, this outward shot. So I describe this to my class as like a camera angles. So we've got a very much of a wide shot going here, and then we're going to narrow it into a mid shot, and we're going to focus on the queue on the inside. So the queue inside the chip shop snaked from the shiny metal counter to the door where a disgruntled looking old man had just entered. He was wearing a flat cap and an old, slightly moth-eaten suit. He was eyeing a gaggle of teenage boys who were laughing loudly. Youth of today, he muttered angrily. Behind the counter was a scrawny, acne-ridden young man. His greasy hair flopped over his forehead, brushing against his glasses, which appeared to have been taped together. Chips are ready, he said, to no one in particular. His glasses sat on a long, slightly crooked nose. He rushed around behind the counter, sweating profusely as order after order came in. At the front of the queue was a slightly haggard-looking man who was trying to order a meal for his 4 young children. However, 3 were sprinting through the forest of legs which made up the rest of the queue, playing a fantastic game of tig. The youngest of the children, who was wearing denim dungarees and had chocolate stains on her face, was struggling to choose her meal, staring at the board above the counter, her face a picture of deep thought and concentration. Behind the counter and through the door was a kitchen. In there, 3 women rushed around, frantically trying to satisfy the enormous demand for chips. The smell of chips frying in the fat filled the air, along with the gentle hissing sound made as they were cooked. The heat in this room made it a furnace, and the chef was dripping with sweat. A huge basket of chips had just finished cooking. They were golden, and the colour made them look like tiny pieces of sunlight. So we've very much got that photographic approach, the wide shot, the mid shot, and then the close-ups of the different characters within that. And if you remember right, we talked about how this was a really good piece of writing, all the language techniques, but this candidate was going to fall down because they didn't have enough variety of punctuation. And we talked about the different ways that we could manipulate it. So what you'll see on this slide is we've got a colon on the second line where a disgruntled looking old man had just entered, and the colon then offers an explanation of what he looks like. And okay, so we've got that there. We've got a bracket after the youngest of the children. The youngest of the children, he was wearing denim dungarees and had chocolate stains on her face, and that could also be a dash. It's an embedded clause, it's typically commas, but we could turn that into brackets or dashes to add variety of punctuation. And then at the bottom, the heat in this room made it a furnace, semicolon, the shift was dripping with sweat. So separating 2 full sentences with a semicolon to say that these sentences are connected, think about them, and for dramatic effect. Okay, so we want to be thinking about doing our punctuation range as well. Okay, this should look really familiar to you. So this is what we did at the end of term, and this is what I call a chunking grid. So effectively, you've got the Joe's Chippy story down the side on the left, and then on the right, we encouraged you to mimic those techniques. So beginning with an adverbial phrase of time, like meanwhile, including a simile, shone like a beacon. We even talked about you could borrow the punctuation. It was a lively, bustling scene, dash, clearly a popular place to be on a Saturday night. So you can borrow that style. So we went through and we asked you to mimic that style to create your own piece of writing. So we did say that you could use your Christmas market story for this section of the exam. We said it wasn't the same question, but it would be useful. So you've got a choice of 2 questions here. Your school or college is asking students to contribute some creative writing for its website. Either write a story about a magical world as suggested by this picture, and you see a little girl there holding a Christmas snow globe, or describe a place you think is beautiful. So you can use this narrative idea and you can create a story about a magical world. So you could maybe your Christmas market is the foundation of this magical world, or you can describe you think a place that is beautiful. Now I don't know about you guys, but I find Christmas markets magical and beautiful, so maybe that's something that you want to use. Okay, you may want to use what you did for your Christmas market in this question. So over the next couple of lessons, you are going to create that piece of writing and you're going to answer one of those questions, and that will complete your mini mock.